You Know What You Should Do by Jessica Lee Morgan. Fans. Without fans, none of us would have a career. They exist in various forms. Uber fans. Stans, as named by Eminem. They will buy all your records, search out all your appearances, steal your set lists, come to all your shows, sometimes follow you on tour. They yearn to be part of your gang. But the line needs to be clear. Artists do not want their warts and all seen. The illusion, no matter how down-to-earth they seem, needs to be maintained. However, these Uber fans are wonderful. Without them, artists would struggle. Artists rely on that fanaticism to keep them going, financially if not ego-wise. The fans often know more about the artist than the artist does themselves. Pat Richmond ran a Mary Hopkin fan website for many years, then transitioned into a Facebook group. She is a lovely person who knows every detail, every gig. And when we launched Mary Hopkin Music with Live at the Royal Festival Hall 1972, Pat was the one who told all her friends and started the ball rolling. We gave her Mary's Eurovision dress, as we knew she'd look after it better than we would. Fans often form tribes. Being a fan of an artist or band means that you often meet with the same people at all their shows. Tribal fans follow the artists around on their tours and will travel all over the place to see them. They meet up and form lasting bonds with each other. I know that Mary's fans, who met back in the late 60s, still keep in touch with each other, even if they're spread all over the country. Often these fans will see one band, then go to see the shows that members of the band play elsewhere. Since the bands themselves are often related, as in a family tree, it's logical that the fans follow the branches. Fans take a much deeper interest in how their favourite music comes into being. Chris is a big fan of Adamant. As a young teen, he loved his song Apollo 9. He saw on the single sleeve, producer Tony Visconti, and wondered what he did. After research in the likes of smash hits, he became interested in the world of the recording studio and wanted to be a recording engineer. When he got the album Viva La Rock, Tony's name was on it again. I'd been in Good Earth while it was being recorded, making the tea. Of course, we didn't know then that we'd meet at Cardiff University and be together so many years later. We've played Viva La Rock in our live shows. It's a lovely example of how music connects people. I loved you when I was a kid. I've said this and immediately regretted it. I've since realised that it means, I loved that one song you did and haven't kept up with anything else you've done since. Not real fans, but to be applauded nevertheless. You can be any kind of fan you want, but just don't try and explain it directly to the artist. I loved that song you did. Artists usually don't just do the one song. Mary's famous for one song, but has written and recorded many more, and is still doing so. She feels constantly frustrated that people don't listen beyond that one song. Friends and family fans. Well, they're biased, aren't they? The ones who have told the talent show contestants that they're amazing. Fair enough, that's what friends and family should do. My friends and family appreciate what I do, which is nice. My immediate family never gives me a free pass, though, and are totally honest about whatever I do. My friends have come to my gigs, and that's so lovely, even when they have to buy a ticket. Some people you simply have to put on the guest list. Dennis LeCorrier is one. I've known him since I was 6, when he was in a long-distance relationship with my mum. He is the consummate tourer and performer. Like Robin Hitchcock, he could do a show with no songs and never bore the audience. So when we supported Robin in Worthing, Dennis came along. It turned out he was also a fan of Robin's, but Robin was in pre-gig mode when I introduced them, and so they didn't chat for long. It felt good to play my songs to Dennis, now that I was a grown-up, and catch up with him after many years. Another time we played the Half Moon in Putney, which happens to be Ralph McTell's local pub. I didn't even need to put him on the guest list, as his granddaughter worked the door. Playing our Those Were the Days show to him was nerve-wracking, to say the least. Some people ask me for a few backstage passes for, say, a Holy Holy Best of Bowie gig, to which I say, no, sorry, they don't let me have them. If it's my own gig, the only people on my guest list are either my immediate family or people in the industry I want to impress. I need everyone else to buy tickets because otherwise it comes out of my pocket. People often claim that they're distant relatives, so we have to maintain boundaries. My family is private, and for others to lay false claims to it makes me deeply uncomfortable. So-called friends operate in a similar way. People love to talk about who knew who at school and how nice, awful they were. Real friends will help you carry your gear. Fake friends will just brag about you and then try to drag you down to the gutter. Autographs. Mary has a no autograph policy now. Actually, it's my policy. Mary used to give autographs and was besieged by fans waving paper at her. After her very first TV appearance, someone accosted her at dinner and inserted a piece of paper in between her fork and her mouth, saying, "Sign this." She declined. There are fake autographs for sale on eBay. Some are actually signed by Mary's mother, my grandmother Betty, who was only trying to be helpful. Betty and my grandfather Howell ran the Mary Hopkin Friendly Society, and often Betty would write back to fans, sometimes as herself and sometimes as Mary. There's one chap who maintains that Mary helped him with his maths homework, which makes her laugh as maths was never her strong point. Mary was unaware of all this at the time. There is no way of verifying an autograph unless there's a picture of the celebrity signing it, and now even the picture can be faked. Outside the stage door or the tour bus, there are people, and I've seen plenty of this at Holy Holy Best of Bowie shows, with a load of vinyl and printed photos who ask the artist to sign them. Then we see them end up on eBay the same day. I'll sign things at gigs because I'm right there and I've met the person. No one has stalked me outside gigs just yet, apart from a Japanese person who chased me down the street at our Tokyo hotel calling, "Mr. Visconti," and asked me to sign a card. But you can tell the eBayers a mile off. I once signed to eBay because the guy was so offhand about it. Someone just emailed me, and I get this a lot, asking if he could send a picture to Mary for her to sign. He's a big fan and loves all her music, he says. His name or email doesn't appear on any of my album sales spreadsheets. When I said no, Mary doesn't sign anything anymore, he said that it's a pity and he'd have to try and buy one somewhere. I can't understand this at all. How does that constitute a personal connection? If he was a proper fan, I'd know his name. I know the names of all the regular buyers. Also, you get someone claiming to be disabled. Perhaps they are genuine, with a long rambling email asking for autographs or memorabilia. They mass email everyone. I can tell because they've left some other celebrity's name in the email. In any case, like Ringo, no autographs thank you is the best policy for us. Audiences. Audiences have changed for the worse since the pandemic. It's as if they all forgot how to go to gigs and behave themselves. Apparently, the new thing is to throw your phone onto the stage in the hope that the artist will pick it up and take a selfie or call your mum with it. One poor girl required stitches after a phone hit her during her set. Artists shouldn't have to wrangle with the crowd. They're there to perform, and the audience are there by choice. Whether they've paid or not, all should be expected to play their part properly. Talking. I like to think of gigs as a conversation. However, it's a one-sided conversation. The audience should only reply when invited to do so. There was that one time, though. We went to see Heaven 17 at the Hexagon in Reading. Chris and I were sat at the back of the stalls next to the sound and lighting engineers, Hutch and Martin, who also worked with Holy Holy. The lights shone on the crowd, and Glenn looked straight at me and says, "Oh, look, it's Jessica Lee Morgan. Hiya, Jess." The crowd went silent. "Hi, Glenn. Hi, Berenice," I replied sheepishly. The artist, however loud they are, can hear you talking. Sometimes it's a general din that ruins their quiet songs. Sometimes it's just between songs when they're trying to talk to the audience. Sometimes it's two people right in front of them who are talking about either how they heard so-and-so do this song in 1973, or they're talking about the holiday they've just been on. Whatever, don't do it. In Glasgow once, Chris and I were supporting the Blow Monkeys. We don't expect a reverent silence, after all, we're just the support act. However, 3 people were standing at my feet and talking very loudly indeed. Now, it's known that Glasgow audiences can be difficult, but coupled with the fact that the sound engineers hadn't turned our monitors on, I couldn't concentrate. And so I stopped midway through a song and asked them to shut up. I thought I'd be murdered, but I didn't care. At the end, those people apologised and said they were trying to figure out what I had strapped to my foot. It was my foot tambourine. If they'd just asked me between songs, I'd have answered. Another time, we were supporting Robin Hitchcock in Totnes, a tiny bijou venue. Robin plays some songs that are quiet and draw you in. He's also well over 6 feet tall, so you wouldn't want to annoy him. A drunken woman was talking continually to her boyfriend. They were also canoodling at times. During a break between songs, Robin was tuning and told them to go away. She answered back. Cue a volcano from Robin. People had paid money to be there and they were ruining it for everyone. Eventually they left, but complained on Twitter that night. Most people took Robin's side. Personally, I was grateful for the public debate on such an inflammatory topic. If you can't shut up for an hour or so, don't come to a gig. Stay in the bar or play your own damn gig. Photographs. Some artists quite like photos of themselves on stage, and some don't. In this age of social media, we can't stop it, so here are some tips. 1. All songs look the same. You only have to take a picture of one for posterity. 2. Turn off your phone flash. It won't reach the artist and will just light up the heads of the people in front of you. It will also piss off the artist. 3. The same goes for video. All the artist gets is a blinding light from the audience for the duration of a song. This was so distracting to Rob Halford of Judas Priest that he kicked the phone out of someone's hands. 4. Your video will be rubbish. It won't show the artist well. You probably wouldn't watch it back later either. 5. Selfies with the artist in the background are tacky, and we can see you taking it, turning your backs to us in doing so. 6. Your phone photo is not a professional photo. The resolution, quality, is too low. I know fans who are trying to become professional photographers in order to see their favourite artist, even offering backstage photography services. I wonder why. They may sometimes get a lucky shot, but a phone cannot compete with a professional camera, lens and skill, not to mention access to the photography pit. 7. Having said all that, if you do happen to get a good photo or video, by all means post it on social media and tag the artist. We'd love to see them. Phones. If you're scrolling your phone during a gig, your face lights up beautifully in blue. I've called people out for this. I can see you're on your phone, your face is lit up, I can see it from here, I wonder if you can hear me talking to you. No, you can't because you're too engrossed in whatever it is you're looking at. The rest of the audience laughs. At a recent gig I attended, in the audience, a lady was scrolling through the Amazon app as the artists were on stage. If you're filming the gig, you're not watching it fully. You just contribute to a sea of other phones in the way of anyone trying to watch. Bring back lighters in the air, I say. And God forbid your phone should ring during a gig. Even worse if you answer it. I once played at a 60th birthday party. The birthday boy had requested I sing Amsterdam by Jacques Brel. I sang Bowie's version in 2 languages. In the dramatic pause, his phone rang loudly. Laughter erupted. He was mortified. Phone off, enjoy the gig. Post-gig fans. For a while after COVID, meeting the fans was a no-no. We couldn't risk catching anything. Even before that, the tour manager would line up baroccas and hand sanitizer. But now all that seems to have been forgotten. We read of some quite astonishing behaviour at the stage door. Artists getting grabbed and harassed. I've always found it odd that people want to hang out by the stage door, but it seems that will never change. There have always been stage door Johnnies. The most likely place for fans to meet artists is at the merch stand. After one Blow Monkey show, we took up our posts. a chap asked if he could get an album signed. Dr. Robert's wife, Michelle, who manages the band and the merch, said, "Sure, Robert will be out in a minute." This chap nearly lost his mind. By the time Robert came out and did the deed, taking a photo with him too, he was in tears. Back in the dressing room, I told Robert that he'd made that guy's year. He said he couldn't understand why anyone would feel like that, and asked if I ever did. I replied that I was still slightly in awe of him, and he was a bit embarrassed. I mean, he'd been in smash hits when I was a kid. Touring with Holy Holy was quite a revelation. Much of the operating costs of a tour are covered by sales on the merch stand. After the shows, we were told to line up at a very long signing table where we would sign copies of the live album, and sometimes even copies of David Bowie albums. Of course, the queue for Woody and Tony was longest. Some of the fans were quite ghoulish. Lisa Ronson was grilled on how she felt when her father died. She seemed unfazed by it, but we were horrified. In later years, most of us would go out to the merch desk because we had CDs to sell and because people tended not to mob us. But Glenn stopped, and Tony did too, because he would literally be cornered. We had to start thinking of our health. Woody, conversely, adored it and gave fans all the time they wanted. Woody's wife June was in charge of the merch stand. Fans loved talking to her, and she knew what she was selling. In 2016, in America, the VIP tickets were introduced. A small group was allowed in during sound check, but not allowed to take photos. We'd signed stacks of posters that clearly didn't all get distributed to the VIP ticket holders, so what happened to the rest? One night in Shepherd's Bush, probably the last gig of a tour, I ended up outside the front of the venue post-gig. I must have been looking for or saying goodbye to someone. Further out on the pavement, I spotted Glenn sneaking away. He often vanished in a puff of smoke at the end of a tour, and this time I was determined not to let him do it. "Hey, Glenn!" I shouted. He stopped. I went over, hugged him and said goodbye, and left him in a small huddle of fans. I think he's forgiven me. Holy Holy, Best of Bowie. I joined Holy Holy in 2015. The band had already formed and played some gigs. In 2014, they did a tourette of 4 shows, and my brother Morgan opened for them. I joined him in Shepherd's Bush on backing vocals. Originally, the band formed for a gig at Latitude Festival in 2013. Clem Burke of Blondie was on drums, I believe, and Woody Woodmansey took over for 3 songs. Then he fancied doing more. Tom Wilcox, the maverick who put it all together, invited Tony to join and to perform The Man Who Sold the World album live. I went to see them rehearse before I'd joined and before I'd heard the album. They had a ropey, rocky feel. Then I listened to the album straight after, on my way to coach Daphne Guinness for her part in the proceedings, and realised that they'd caught the feel of the original album precisely. Everyone was invited to play. A harmonica part, Benny Marshall from the Rats. A flute part, Chris Constantinou from Adamant's band. Daphne was singing Watch That Man with Glenn, and panicking at the Love Me Do part in Jean Genie. She phoned everyone for advice, including her mate Jeff Beck. Some Ronsons, Mick's sister Maggie, his daughter Lisa, and his niece Hannah on backing vocals. Steve Norman was on sax and 12-string. Paul Cuddiford and James Stevenson were on guitars. Glenn Gregory brought Berenice Scott on keys, both of Heaven 17. Rod Melvin, who wrote Hit Me With Your Rhythm Stick with Ian Dury, was on piano. Erdal Kizilkay was on bass when Tony wasn't playing, and keyboards when he was. Kevin Armstrong was on a guitar, and Gary Kemp too. There were a lot of people in this band. They recorded one of the 2014 gigs at Shepherd's Bush and made an album. Maggie declined to be a part of it, and so I replaced her vocals. Rough and ready with my eyes shut, using a Shure SM58, a standard stage microphone. I was under my stairs in Walthamstow at the time, which is where I did all my vocals. I was invited to join Lisa and Hannah for the next tour. Hannah was also playing keys and recorder, and I suggested we be called the Ronties. Heels and little black dresses on, tambourines at the ready. The whole Flying Circus toured the UK in June 2015. Before we left, Tom organised a massed karaoke in Soho. About 15 of us were crammed into a room that got more and more raucous. There we were, with Glenn singing Temptation and us girls competing for the high bits. Even Woody sang. The finale was us all with our arms around each other's shoulders singing, "I want to know what love is." Cringy as it was an important bonding experience. After all, we all had to rock out on stage together as if we were old chums. Strangely, Hassie Hayridge, a comedian known for playing Holly in Red Dwarf, was there. An icon from my youth. She must have wondered if she got transported into the wrong party. Tom invited Chris to be a tech, then to drive one of the vans. Because I was trained at university to drive minibuses, I volunteered to be a backup driver to take the strain off Chris. On launch day, 2 out of 6 drivers declined to drive the massive black Mercedes Sprinters, and so there were 4 of us. I was driving most of the elders. The crew expanded and contracted as the tour went on, but we got through it. I think it was new to all of us. There were a lot of mouths to feed, and to this day I can't look at the yellow reduced stickers in a supermarket without flashbacks. However, I did get to support all the shows with Chris and sometimes with Morgan. Tom thought I'd be lonely, so he also got Philip Rambo, who wrote There's a Guy Who Works Down the Chip Shop Swears He's Elvis with Kirsty MacColl to open. This was too much. Poor Phil had only 20 minutes and frequently overran. 7 of us went to Japan at the end of it. We did 4 gigs in 2 days at the Billboard Cafe in Tokyo. I got horribly drunk with Tom Wilcox. Being Wilcoxed is now an adjective. Trying to find out what made him tick. But I still made the second day of shows. I regret missing out on some sightseeing though. After this tour, the band carried on. In 2016, we played an 8-date tour of Eastern USA. On the 8th of January, we played New York, the Highline Ballroom. Tony called David Bowie from the stage, and everyone, band and audience, sang Happy Birthday to him. Same day, Black Star was released. The next gig was cancelled, lack of ticket sales or something, and we went up to Toronto, where, in the early hours, we all heard the news that David had died. Only Tony knew that he had been ill. We agreed over breakfast that we should carry on. I said so anyway. And thankfully, Tony and Woody felt the same. We became ambassadors, missionaries, and Tony publicly went through the 7 stages of grief. At every gig, everyone cried, audience and band alike. We squeezed in a second night in Toronto before scooting all the way down to Virginia for the next one the following day. With the unexpected success of this tour, we extended a Carnegie Hall Bowie concert booked for 1st of April, way before he had died, into another 6-week tour of the USA. Radio City was added the next day. We were the house band for many luminous beings: Cyndi Lauper, Perry Farrell, Jacob Dylan, Robin Hitchcock, Gogol Bordello, Ricky Lee Jones, who's a story all of her own, Cat Power, Esperanza Spalding, Bessie Levette, Laurie Anderson. We travelled all over the USA, to some hairy places where sometimes we were lauded and other times we were Bowie Tribute 8 p.m. Our promoter was not helpful. Tony thought we were being sabotaged. The tour manager was also the front-of-house sound engineer and seemed to find doing 2 jobs quite a handful. Nerves wore thin, but we all look back on it with a happy smile and would love to do it all again. There is no other sensible way you drive all through the USA, seeing cacti and oil drills and weapons at truck stops, next to the Bibles, eating at Cracker Barrel on a strip mall, where I nearly walked Tony, Chris and myself into a 10-foot storm drain. These places are not for pedestrians. June, Woody's wife, was also with us, the band mother and in charge of merch. Up until the second USA tour, Terry Edwards was on saxophone and 12-string duties. Then he couldn't make the second tour due to other bookings and family needs. I blagged about how I could play saxophone, and he called my bluff. He used the line from Spinal Tap, "Maybe there's somebody already in the organisation." So he came over and coached me. The sax parts are not actually that demanding. Terry is so much better than those parts. But anyway, I learnt them. Tony later said he thought I was deluded. I think everyone was dubious. James Stevenson complained about wanting his mate Steve to come back. Then I caught him telling a journalist how awesome I was. My legendary hangover in Japan helped my reputation enormously. Terry came to do the big Carnegie Hall and Radio City shows in April 2016. Woody said to me, "You know, it's because there might be divas and we don't want to drop you in at the deep end." So Terry joined us up until Boston and then I took over. It was so great getting out from the back of the stage. I went up to the front and I had the time of my life. I was shit scared the first few nights, but I made it. There are no free passes, even if your dad is in the band. I had to get it right, or mostly right anyway. We had been playing The Man Who Sold the World from start to finish, and then some hits. In late 2017, we switched to playing Ziggy Stardust, and then some other hits. Then we had a conversation in Finland, where we said we missed playing the songs from The Man Who Sold the World, and ended up doing both albums back to back, with a couple of extra encores. This would have been a great time to do split sets and save bladders of both the band and the audience, but no one seemed to think of it. Also in 2017, Tony was part of a Sky Arts TV programme called Guitar Star. At the live finale show, Holy Holy backed a number of people, as well as the finalists of the show. There was Bob Geldof, Imelda May, and Tony's fellow judges Nitin Sawhney and Stuart Copeland. I had to pinch myself as I'm a massive Police fan, and there I was playing percussion with their drummer. During the 2019 tour, we played the Palladium in London. This was special for me because Mary had done a pantomime season there in 1970, when she played Alice Fitzwarren alongside Tommy Steele's Dick Whittington. She had made it her home for a few months, so when we installed ourselves for the day, I went all around the backstage looking for her dressing room. She had described where it was, and I'm pretty sure our crew were using it the day of the show. I called her to confirm. Next door to it was our room, which would have been Ken Connor's room when she was there. So many legends have played this theatre. Tony said so on stage, and I stepped forward and added Mary to the list. Just before the stage door there is a huge mirror, and I felt a thrill looking into it as she would have done. Chris and I even went looking under the stage at all the trapdoors and hydraulics, and at the ashes of Bruce Forsyth, well, the plaque next to them. We played several tours until 2020, when we only managed 4 shows, and Jeanette Mason replaced Berenice on keyboards. Our last was a triumphant gig in the Roundhouse in Camden, 50 years to the day when Bowie, Ronson, John Cambridge and Tony played there, together as the Hype. Keith Christmas supported that one, and I got to sing Letter to Hermione with him. He'd even played on the original recording and the original Roundhouse gig. It was the eve of lockdown. We lost half our audience. The following Friday, Heaven 17, we shared a tour manager in Mark Wiles, pulled their gig there. But I'm ashamed to say, I hugged everyone. Chris got COVID, a prolonged few weeks on the sofa, but I didn't. Half our people did though. Scary times. I've supported most of the tours with Chris, sometimes with Morgan, except for 2019 when John Bramwell from I Am Flute joined us. I don't think he was well, and after Manchester he called in sick, so I was asked to support the last 2 gigs on my own. In 2022, we fell apart slightly. Our tour, postponed from 2021, was in March, and restrictions were still in place for COVID. We'd all been vaccinated except for Woody. Eventually he was replaced with Steve Smiley Barnard, who played with James in The Alarm. We went out as Tony Visconti's Best of Bowie. We had a few refund requests, but ultimately the tour sold very healthily. Chris and I supported that one too, and Chris manned the merch. As I write, a tour of England has been announced for May 2025. I've learned to take a step back and not worry about what goes on. After all, it's not my name on the posters. Everyone in the band has different needs. Some won't travel on a tour bus, but others love it or can put up with it. As for Spinal Tap, I've seen so many of those scenes in real life, just from Holy Holy tours. Getting lost backstage, arguments over bread, over management, over not being able to play a part. It's all true. One of my favourite moments in Spain was watching 2 veteran rockers try and work out a coffee machine for about 10 minutes. On another night in Spain, Paul and I went for a walk, only to get lost in the underground car park with about half an hour until stage time, and then pleading with the door people to let us in because we were the band. Personally, I think we need to do a TV show, The Best of Tony Visconti. I don't think we've even literally done Tony Visconti's Best of Bowie. When Tony started speaking and telling stories at the end of the 2022 gigs, people couldn't get enough of it. We need to evolve. But ultimately, even though our oldest member is 80, there is still the desire, and we know that the Showtime buzz overshadows every little thing.